since joining the Corps, one of the questions that I actually get asked the most is, what would you change about education now that you've actually been inside of the classroom? And I think that we see this both, at the state level and at the national level. We see these questions around education and educational policy specifically. And a lot of the times, what we see is conversations around curriculum, what type of training we should be giving to teachers. We see things about school funding and what that should look like as well when we're talking about bills and how we're going to spend that money. But I think one of the things in these conversations that gets missed most of the time, and one of the things that I've experienced the most as a teacher, is that we can't necessarily separate education policy from social policy and from the social issues that we as teachers are kind of dealing with on a daily basis. For instance, a lot of my students are coming to me with issues that are outside of my control when they come inside my classroom. I have students that deal with chronic homelessness. I have students who are um, malnourished at times or who don't necessarily have the resources to be as successful, maybe as some of their peers in other districts. So I think that's always something that's really important that I try to emphasize in my conversations around education, education policy. And specifically, one of the things that I've found um, to be very effective at my school, and one of the things that I've advocated here at my school is for more funding for after school programs. As a teacher, one of the things that I really noticed when I started to have conversations with a lot of my students was that a lot of my kids were actually going home to unsupervised environments, whether it was their parents were working later or their parents had other sort of responsibilities. What I noticed was my kids were a lot of the times having to go home to unsupervised conditions, and this would get them into a lot of trouble um, at home. So, one of the things that I talked to my administration about, and one of the things that I believe should be happening at a federal level, is more investment in after school programs. So one of the things that I did here at my school is we basically set up a partnership with a local nonprofit, um, and we essentially created an after-school program for these students. And we enrolled as many students as we possibly could to kind of mitigate a lot of the social issues that we see here in our community, such as poverty, such as homelessness, or even malnourishment. So at a federal level, what I would be proposing, or what I would kind of like to see at a policy level, would to be more federal funding to local school boards and to states that provide that funding needed for after school programs. Um, in fact, about 3 in 5 parents who have access to after school programs at their school currently cited payment as a reason for why they weren't able to get their kids into an after school program. So that's my biggest policy agenda would be to basically provide more federal funding to allow for after school programs after school that would mitigate a lot of the social issues that we as teachers are having to deal with when we see our students on a daily basis.